there's a rocket launch going off right now. Because I live right next to Vandenberg Space Force Base, and there's a rocket launching right now.
Could you literally see it?
I can see it out the window, yeah. So if you hear the rattling, that's the rocket.
Yeah, I hear it. That's
they got one a week this year that they're launching.
Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty annoying when you're sleeping in the middle of the night. There's the sonic boom. Yeah.
Wow. That was crazy.
Yeah, okay. So that was a Falcon 9 rocket. So we went out like any normal day to just do a routine patrol, and we parked the trucks. I was part of the dismount crew, and we hiked up this mountain, and we started walking back down. I'm still up at the top, set up in my gun position for support by fire because I was carrying the Mark 48. So we start taking sniper fire, and everybody gets down. Every time our guys are trying to come up, we get some more shots, heads go back down. So I started doing a couple rounds, and I go, all right, let's go, start moving. So everybody started bounding down the mountain. Well, while I'm running down, I came to a kind of a little slowdown area because it was like a formation of rocks that, curves out. So I'm taking this trail that curves out. So my body's turned to the side. As I'm turned to the side, my rucksack gets shot. The decisions that you choose to make could affect big things around you that you don't even realize. And what I mean by that is I attempted to take my life Christmas night in 2019. And I already felt like a monster from being an infantryman and being deployed. I put my wife and kids to bed that night, grabbed my gun, and attempted to kill myself. I pulled the trigger. It did not go off. And I can't explain, like
The Patina'd Podcast is about the earned wisdom found in pain. It's about chasing failure, catching it, and using that as an opportunity. It's about scar tissue and sinew. It's about stretch marks and dented fenders and refusing to hide them. It's about pushing our insecurities and shame to the forefront instead of behind us. Instead of seeing rust as something that compromises a structure's integrity, we choose to see it as the grit that builds character. This is the Patina'd Podcast. All right, so I just want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Patina'd Podcast. Today's guest we have with us is Erik Koenig. How I kind of stumbled upon you, Erik, is I think you showed up through the Instagram, and I kind of click on your page, and I kind of started following. I'm like, holy cow, there's so much stuff that we have in common. So Erik is a father, he's a husband. So those two things, check. We are in common. He's an OEF combat veteran. I am as well. So like those things, like a lot of people would meet those criteria, not super unique, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Then Erik also has lost a ton of weight as a way to take care of his mental health and just overall wellness. Me as well, 90 pounds. So you more than that, but, and then, just slightly. And then Erik is also an ultra runner, which I am new in that world as well. So there's another common link. And then, something I meant to ask, are you still sober?
Still sober, coming up on 4 years this month. So
yeah, so that's another commonality that we have is you're coming up on 4 years of sobriety. I've been sober for 17 years. So again, we have a whole plethora of different themes and avenues that we can talk about today with the overall background theme being around resilience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation, man. One of the things I like to do is with my guest is try to give the people who are listening some background, some of the origin story. And I typically drop back to as early as childhood. So yeah, Erik, if you're okay with it, let's drop back to your childhood and kind of how that was for you.
Yeah. So I actually had a pretty well off childhood. Like I cannot complain about it at all. I had both parents. I had 5 brothers and two sisters, one older sibling. So there's 8 of us. So growing up in a household with a lot of kids, there's that little bit of neglect factor, with being a middle child. And when you're a middle child within a big family, it's a heck of a lot different. And, my parents having to try and calculate times to being able to spend with everybody, it's kind of tough, to where we're taking care of ourselves quite a bit. They're working long hours every day. My dad, like, I hardly saw him growing up. He was probably at work 18 to 20 hours every day, working his accounting firm. But the times that we did see him, we, tried to make the most of it. He also is a veteran. He was an officer in the Army. He was a Cab Scout. So he had kind of a strict rule in the house, and my mom as well was very strict. Back during the time growing up, when you act like a little, knucklehead, you get a little whooping or whatever. So, I mean, I grew up with that. Like, the 4 oldest kids in our family, like, it's mainly me and my older brother. We got more of the whoopings, and then, it kind of got a little easier on the younger kids as it went down. So, through high school, developing as a young teen, being a dumb idiot like I was always getting into trouble. I kind of lived a free and carefree life. I just graduated high school and started going to culinary school because I really loved to cook. I took care of my younger siblings most of the time and made all the meals while my parents were working. It's that sense of service that I always had too growing up. I tend to like to help others before I help myself. So getting into the food industry is kind of like that. So I got my degree in culinary arts, my associates. I had quite a few like offers to where I could have worked at some pretty big restaurants like in the Bay Area, and I turned it all down to become an infantryman in the Army. Believe it or not. Yeah. So I don't regret that at all. I'm glad that I went into the Army and served. I met a lot of pretty cool guys, and we went to combat together and saw a lot of stuff that nobody normal would ever see. I'm sure you can relate to that. And now in my adult life is dealing with all those things through therapy and through running. So, yeah, I mean, my childhood wasn't all too bad. I mean, there's certain characteristics that maybe shaped me in a younger age to where it changed me that I wasn't aware of. I wasn't aware of all these thinking traps and where it led me after the Army, because I was so used to the routine and being in it. Once I got out of it, it started bringing up all those icebergs, and just my whole mental state was a little messed up, because you go from having a decent childhood, maybe being treated a little differently, and then going into the Army and being treated like nothing, like, bottom to nothing, and then not knowing how to reciprocate anything getting out of the Army, because you're silenced from your emotions, and a lot of that too through childhood, with developing with parents that are just like, no, you're not sad, you're happy, this is a happy thing, like it. A lot of that just has recently come to surface. So, like, I'm working through a lot of this stuff through therapy with the vet center, and since the pandemic I started going and seeking therapy, which is when I went sober too, and that's when kind of the transformation has started, was just a few years ago.
Yeah. Well, Eric, you're saying there's some specific events or things that might have shaped some of these loops that you're talking about. And if you're okay with it, any specific events that come to mind when you're talking about childhood experiences or certain things that kind of help shape some of the thinking patterns that would take place later in life?
So, like I was saying with school, I kind of like stopped giving a crap, because it just seemed like with all my brothers and sisters, my parents had their hands full. So I kind of gave no mind to my education and just thought, like this is a joke because nobody takes it serious with me. And I was close to not being able to graduate because I failed a class and I had to go back through like night school to fix that. And that's when I started learning, about succeeding through my failures. So like, I felt like I was always on a crash course to fail. And nobody really looked out for me. It was just kind of like, oh, that's Erik, that's just how he is. He's kind of an asshole. So like living with that was kind of like a chip on my shoulder that just was not the best, and living in the darkness, that's kind of how I started out, was in the darkness, and that's kind of where I've been for a while until recently.
You said that was the first time where you started to realize that you can succeed through your failures. And as we continue to go through this, I guess, this origin story where there's this dark time for you up until recently, what did all that look like as you continue to kind of move forward and develop in life?
Yeah. So by failing through school, I came back and succeeded, and was able to graduate. And then I went into culinary school, and I actually was a pretty outstanding student in culinary school. It was a subject that I enjoyed. I loved learning about different cuisines, different techniques of cooking. Like just, I still use a lot of those techniques today. I've actually changed to being completely vegan now. So I'm trying to learn new things. And I've failed a lot with food too. Like in baking, you can make one wrong little tiny measurement and it messes up the whole entire thing. So like I'm used to failing there. But then in the Army, I was never a runner at all. I grew up swimming and playing water polo. I never ran in my life, and I hated push-ups. I grew up with like a heart condition when I was in my youth too, to where like I didn't like running at all. Swimming was great for it. It helped build a lot of my cardiovascular that I didn't really have due to the issue. And so, yeah, running just wasn't my thing. I hated it. Being a chef too, I was a little overweight at the time when I went into the Army. So I failed my PT test, the first one.
Me too.
Yeah. And even the PT test leading up to getting into the Army, I failed all those. And it wasn't the push-ups, it wasn't the sit-ups, it was the run by like just a few seconds. And I'm like, what the heck am I doing wrong, man? And because I always felt like I was freaking dying when I was breathing, because nobody taught me how to run. I had to learn through that failure of failing the PT test to learn where I had to make some changes. So I worked a lot more on like my core, because a stronger core was going to give me stronger results on the run and on my legs, and doing interval training. So like, during basic training at night, I'd run intervals around the building with some of the guys to try and produce a little more speed. So by the time I was done with basic training, I've completed my 2-mile run like just at 13 minutes, which at 19 years old, I mean, that's decent. And then from there, I went to my unit. I failed my PT test at my unit because I was completely obliterated the night before. That's when I started really heavy drinking. You know how the barracks parties were. So yeah. So I got into the wrong crowd there, and still didn't take running serious when I should have. And right before deployment, I failed that PT test and it flagged me. So once again, I fell into that thinking trap of, man, I'm a failure. It's not going to get any better from here. Now we're going into deployment. Anything can happen. I don't know if I'll come home. And it's probably just because it's me. Because it's me, it's going to happen to me, and I always fell into those toxic thinking traps during just the coming up from childhood to the Army and then beyond that. So then on deployment, I did get injured due to combat.
I just wanted to take a quick pause and genuinely thank you for getting this far through the episode. This podcast is very small if you haven't noticed. So every like, every comment, every follow or subscribe, it it really makes a difference. So my only request from you is to interact with the content if you like it. Like and follow, rate and review, and share if you feel like this is something that's worthy of sharing. Thank you so much.
I tore my Achilles and my foot was broken. Like literally the bone was sticking out the side, but didn't break the skin. And my leg was swollen up like, I want to say like 4 or 5 times the size of my regular. Yeah.
Can you explain the situation that took place there where you're in a situation to be, I'm assuming ambushed or something? Can you kind of help paint that picture of how that happened?
Yeah. So we went out like any normal day to just do a routine patrol. And where I was stationed at the time was Wardak province in RC East, right on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we got to the location where the FOB had said the indirect fire came from. So we parked the trucks. I was part of the dismount crew, and we hiked up this mountain, which was a good, 2,600 to 2,800 feet from where we're at, which in Afghanistan elevation, our base elevation where we're at was 7,200 feet. So we were up there for like a good 30, 45 minutes, I think, researching the whole site. We had a new platoon leader, so he was our Rambo. He thought he knew everything. So when it came time to leaving, he ordered everybody to go down the same way we came up, which, as you know, as an infantryman, you don't do that.
That's not smart.
You don't do that. You don't use the same path that you just went up. Yep. Because if the enemy's watching you, they are zoned in on that. So I refused, and he was like, well, I'm going to write you up for an Article 15 if you don't get your ass down this mountain on this same trail. And I was like, all right, sir, well, it's not going to be a good thing. We can just take this little trail that goes down and we'll meet up with the truck still, because it's just a few extra 100 feet that we'd have to walk, on the road there when we get down. I just came up with a better avenue, and what did I know? I was just a little private first class, but I was also a gun team leader. So I knew a little bit what I was talking about. I was deployed for a whole year almost to that point, and he was deployed for like maybe 2 months. So, but he was the experienced guy, which one of my squad leaders actually said, he brings up a good point, sir. Like, we should probably do what the private says. He's been on like every mission with us. He knows what's about to go down. And he goes, nah, the trucks are right there. We're just going to go back down. So we start walking back down. I'm still up at the top, set up in my gun position for support by fire, because I was carrying the 240. Well, dismounted that day, I was using the Mark 48. So it's a 7.62 version of the saw. So we start taking sniper fire, and everybody, gets down. The rocks that we're hiding behind are like barely covering our face, laying flat in prone position on the ground. And because I'm dismounted by myself, I don't have my gun team with me, and I'm carrying like a good 800 rounds, I think, on my back too. So I had a lot of weight on me already. So we start taking sniper fire, and every time our guys are trying to come up, we get some more shots, heads go back down. I start, because I'm the only one with my gun up, so I start doing a couple rounds, and I go, all right, let's go, start moving, because then the trucks down at the bottom, they're giving support by fire too. So everybody started bounding down the mountain. I'm still up on the top, and then I look down, and mostly everybody's pretty much to the bottom at this point, except for Doc, our platoon medic. He was curled up in a ball and just scared for his life. So I yelled to him and asked him if he was okay. And he kind of moved his hand or whatever. So I said, hey, I'm coming down to you. Can you give me some support by fire? He didn't respond. So I'm like, shit, did this guy get shot? And so I do a couple rounds, I get up, start running down. I get down to him, And I'm checking him. I'm like, "Are you hurt? Are you hurt?" He's like, "No, I'm fine. I'm just scared. I just want to go home. I don't want to be here anymore." And blah blah blah. Crying. I was like, "Well, if we're gonna lay down up here, you're not gonna get home. You're gonna make this whole situation worse. So you need to give me some support by fire, and we need to get bound down this mountain." And so he gets down there and curls back up into a ball. And I'm like, "No, support by fire," trying to yell at him. And he's just scared. So I got up and just decided to run for it because there was no way he was going to help protect my life. And I had to take matters into my own hand because at that point, we were the only two on the mountain, it seemed, So I was trying to get this guy home and safe. Well, while I'm running down, I came to a kind of a little slowdown area because it was like a formation of rocks, kind of like a trail that, curves out. So I'm taking this trail that curves out. So my body's turned to the side. As I'm turned to the side, my rucksack gets shot, and it just took all my momentum from me while I was trying to run. And so the rocks that I was on, as you know, are like really bad shale that fall apart. Mm-hmm. So all the weight went onto my left leg, and the rock shattered. So my leg went down on my ankle, basically. So I thought I broke it, right? And then I fall and I'm sliding down the mountain, and I slide right into like right before where Doc was at. And then he finally like saw that I fell, and he pulls me in behind the rocks with him. And he's like, "Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck," like trying to check me. Like I'm trying to stay calm so I don't go into like shock or anything. And he checked me. He's like, "No blood, no blood." He's like, "Can you move your legs?" And blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I couldn't even lean up because my hip was so fucked up from my sappy plate from the side, dug right into my hip. So like I could not move. And I still have trouble today, like getting up out of the chair, which is why I can't stand sitting down. But yeah, so I couldn't stand on my own 2 feet. And I even had my rucksack off at that point because it was too heavy. And I was like trying to get up on my feet, but for sure I could not move my leg. I couldn't move my foot. And thankfully, Sergeant Emerson and Specialist Patina'd were over the ridge over because Doc was calling on my radio for help. They climbed up over this ridge line and were there. They were the last other 2 on the other side of that ridge that were on the mountain as well. Everybody else was already down. We were the last 4 up there. So Sergeant Emerson's, he takes me, throws me over his shoulder, and carries me down the mountain. Specialist Patina'd took my machine gun and started laying waste and took out a donkey and a guy that was hiding behind it with an AK. And, Doc kind of helped carry my bag. And then we got down to the truck, and I got in the truck, and I just started smoking my cigarettes like a train, just trying to not think about the pain because I was like trying not to look at my leg. And my buddy that was in the truck on the gun, he was like, "What happened?" And then Rambo came and opened the door to my vehicle to grab my machine gun. And he grabbed a belt of my ammunition and swung it around him like fucking Hannibal. I was like, "LT, what are you doing?" He was like, "I'm gonna save us." And I was like, "No, you fucking idiot. Just get in the fucking truck. Let's go." Like, that's so stupid, like reckless.
Yeah, he sounds very young. Was he a butter bar or was he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fresh out of West Point.
Wow.
And sent to us. He was military intelligence. He wasn't even infantry.
He was all high speed. He was ready to go. Just listen to me. All of you guys get on my back. I'm going to carry you.
Yeah. Wow. So he took a squad and assaulted the little village, and they kind of got pinned down. So one of our trucks went in. The 50 cal just started laying waste to that building there and got another confirmed kill. And at that point, one of the squad leaders was like, "You're fucking stupid, sir. Get in the truck. Let's go. We're leaving without you." And so we all got in the trucks and left. So they got me back to the med station. And the senior doc, he had to cut my boot off and my pants off just to get a splint on my leg. And then they got me on a helicopter that night. But where I'm getting at with this is that was like a failure to me, because as soon as I got back into country after we got back from deployment, the doctors told me I never run again. And I'm like, at first I was like, oh, okay, cool. I don't have to run it again. You know, I hate running anyway. But I actually started to enjoy it, you know, because I was doing it on deployment, and I was doing a lot more like rucking style runs too. And so that just became an interest of mine. And then it just like got taken away. And then when I was working with the PT was like, yeah, it's not getting any better. You can't really put a lot of weight on it.
Does the Achilles specifically?
Yeah, in the foot, because my
in the
bone,
foot.
yeah, my bone, like the doctors went in to try and fix it, and they were going to restretch my Achilles down, but they said it was hanging by like the smallest little thread. They didn't want to touch it. So they just left it how it was and just sewed me back up. And they were like, yeah, it's going to take a long time and you'll never be able to run again. Then I get medically retired from the Army because of it, which put me in another spot. Like, holy shit, what am I going to do? Like, I thought I was going to do this the rest of my life. I was planning on a career because I loved my job. I loved kicking down doors. I loved learning the weapon systems. I loved shooting them every day. And yeah, and it just got taken from me. So again, I fell into thinking traps and got very down and depressed. And then that's when the drinking for me got really out of control when I got out of the Army. I went on like a 6-month straight of like maybe a bottle a night with a lot of beer. And then when shortly after we got back, within it had to have been a year after I got out. Was it a year? Maybe 2 years. A friend of mine committed suicide. He went home on Christmas up to Michigan, and he was just in a dark place and took his life, unfortunately. And that's where like a lot of my awareness started happening with, you know, with suicide. And like, you know, I never thought it would come my way either. You know, like I tried to stay in a healthy mindset, and I was suppressing it. I was not acknowledging it like I should have been, going to see the VA. And, you know, just, I was seeing counseling when I first got out, and all they were doing was prescribing me meds. So to me, that was just like, how is this helping me at all if you're just trying to silence me as well? And it's like, you don't really care. And that's one of the best sayings that I like to tell people is, nobody cares what you know until they know you care. So if somebody would have showed me that they cared at that point, it might have would have changed my life right then and there, you know, and showed that I could put the work back into myself, that I deserve giving myself self-care and teaching myself how to produce that. But instead it was, here's this, take that type of medicine. It's going to help you sleep. Oh, you got nightmares here. Yeah, this is going to help with that. And then you got your family on the side. You don't need that stuff. Just here's a beer, you know, like, let's go out and drink. Let's go do this. It was that loss of support that I didn't have. So I started my job that I have now with the Bureau of Prisons, and back in 2016. And my wife and I had just got married. She had a miscarriage of our first child. It was a molar pregnancy. And, you know, that I didn't even know exactly what my wife was going through. And I could not give her the type of care I thought I was giving her, because I couldn't even care for my own self. And at that time, I was 285 pounds. And this was, you know, about 2 years out of the Army. And I was 180 pounds when I got out. So like, you know, right there, I went 105 pounds over what I was when I was in the military. So after that happened with my wife, we were kind of getting into the gym and trying to take a little more serious action towards that, because she was like thinking, you know, maybe I wasn't healthy enough to have this baby, and we need to get healthy again. So that's what we were working on during that time. And then when I started my job a few months later, we found out she was pregnant with our daughter. So, but again, I was still drinking. I didn't really see it as a problem at that time, even though I definitely had one. It's one thing to have the occasional drink on occasions, but when you're making every day an occasion, it's
Mm-hmm.
not healthy. We all know
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's just where it went for me. And, I'm just suppressing my feelings and not really sharing anything, and just doing what I was taught to do growing up and through the military, is just keep moving forward. And as a young man, we were never really encouraged to share the way we are now. We're always taught to suppress those feelings and to not acknowledge them, and that everything could be happy, everything could be great, just don't think about it. Well, that's an okay mindset for a psychopath, I guess, which, I fell into that though. So as a few years went down the line, I went from one institution that I was working at to another one in Texas. And then from the one in Texas, we came back to California. So in 2019 is when we moved back. And that was the year that I got really out of control, to where I was splitting a 18 pack with my neighbor every night, and just had very unhealthy habits still. The decisions that you choose to make could affect big things around you that you don't even realize. And what I mean by that is, I attempted to take my life Christmas night in 2019. I was actually off for once on a Christmas for those 2 days. So we drove up to my in-laws to stay the night, and then we celebrated with my family too. And my son was 1.5 years old at the time, and my daughter was almost 3. And we had a pretty good morning, and then getting with my family, just a lot of tension that builds up throughout the year, and it's kind of a pissing contest to see who's the bigger chief,
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I actually didn't drink for the whole week, and just started seeing things from sober eyes, and just the way that the people I'm closest to talk to each other and treat each other. I was like, I don't want to be treated like that, and I don't want to treat anybody else like that. And I already felt like a monster from being an infantryman and being deployed, and now I'm a father, and I don't know how my kids are going to see me if they ever ask me what I did over there. And those thoughts just kept crawling up into my mind, because those were the feelings that I was suppressing for so long from drinking. And now that I wasn't drinking, you're bringing up all this anxiety all at one time. And I tried to play it off, and we drove all the way back to our house a few hours away. I put my wife and kids to bed that night, grabbed my gun out, and attempted to kill myself. I pulled the trigger. It did not go off. And I I can't explain, like in the moment, it was insane to me. Like, how could that happen? Is it because it's just me? Couldn't even get my gun to kill myself. But then I started thinking, like, this has to be a better sign that this wasn't meant to be. And since then, I vowed to myself that I was going to change. A few days later, my wife and I got into an argument on New Year's Eve, because I hadn't really talked at all, like, for a few days. I was just silent, and she knew something was up and didn't know what it was. I drank a little bit that day, And then it came out later where I told her that I tried to do that. And I didn't explain why. I just told her, like, I tried to kill myself. And, like, I just think that's why I'm lashing out a little emotionally, because I was so selfish at that time. And right then and there, I wanted to make it right, and start seeking actual help and getting counseling and doing right by what should have been done long before. So that's when I started going back to the VA that next week. I walked in and I was like, I need to see somebody right now. And they're like, well, we can schedule you. I was like, no, I need to see somebody right now. And so thankfully there was a counselor there that was like, I have an opening and I'll take you right now. So we had like a 4-hour session that day. And that's when it all started in 2020. I cut back my drinking to where I was like maybe having a beer or two a week. So I went from drinking 12 beers a day to that. Like, I was having those withdrawals. And so, like, instead of going cold turkey, I had to do it little by little. But then March 23rd of 2020 is when I officially quit drinking. I went and helped a friend move his house up in Sacramento. And the last day, because we were drinking during that time, I was having like a beer a day or something. We were painting his house and moving his stuff because him and his wife were about to have their first child. I was part of his wedding party too. And just by the last day, I was just like, I don't really want to drink anymore, and just put it down and was like, yeah, I'm done. And when I got home, my wife was like, hey, so I listened to this podcast by Andy Frisella, and I kind of want to do the 75 hard program. I was like, well, what is it? And she told me what it was. And I listened to the podcast, and then we decided that that's what we started doing together. Because I needed some type of regiment in my life, some type of routine to get back into, to mentally focus on something and create a goal or a challenge for myself to see if I can really succeed. And while I was going through therapy, I'm explaining to my therapist that I'm doing that. And he's like, that's a great thing. Like, he's like, we haven't even gotten that far that I was going to mention to do something of that nature, because usually if you do a habit for 21 days, it becomes ingrained in you and you typically carry out with it longer. So the 75 days is kind of a hard task to commit yourself to, because it's not very much time at all. But when you're in it, it seems a lot longer. But I had to do it 3 times because I failed twice before finishing it, because again, I learned through failure. So and it was little slip ups too, like forgetting to take my progress photo or eating some chips that are not in my diet, like
what is can you explain what this hard 75 is? Like, exactly what was it for you?
Yeah. So 75 hard, you can actually go on Andy Frisella's podcast, listen to episode 14, I believe. If you just look up rules of the 75 hard challenge, it's episode 8 or 14, I think. But yeah, so you take a progress photo every day. You drink a gallon of water every day. You read 10 pages in a nonfiction book every day. You do 2 workouts every day, one being outside, one being indoors, or they could both be outside, but they have to be 45 minutes each. And if you're in like a snowstorm or something like that, that's not recommended to be outside, then you can do 2 inside workouts if you have to. But fortunately enough, I lived in California, so I didn't have to worry about that. Then you have to stick to a diet with no cheat meals, no alcohol, no drug use. Yeah, you have to hold yourself accountable for 75 days doing the same thing. And it definitely puts you in a good routine, like it's healthy. You read nonfiction books and learning other people's stories, and it really opens up your mind of like what more there is that you can do out there. So like for me, the books that I read throughout the whole process, I started with Dean Karnanzas' Ultramarathon Man.
Mm.
because my wife was reading David Goggins' book at the time, and I was like, well, who's another like endurance athlete that I could read? And I
Mhm.
looked up top endurance athlete books, and that was Dean's book. So I was like, yeah, I'll read that. So I read his book. I read Rich Roll's book. I read Goggins' book. I read Born to Run.
Why were you leaning into a lot of these endurance books? Why was endurance the theme of your
So,
nonfiction?
so a lot of my workouts for 75 hard was like swimming, and I started learning more about like channel swimming
Mm.
and endurance swimming. And when I grew up, like I trained and did a triathlon when I was 10 years old. So
Mm.
my wife was kind of pushing me towards like, you should maybe do a triathlon. You're a really good swimmer, and that's the hardest discipline for any triathlete is swimming. I mean, you got that down. You can do everything else. I was like, yeah, but running sucks. And she's like, yeah, well, you don't know. You might be good at it. In 2020, after I completed 75 hard to treat myself, I signed up for Ironman Wisconsin because I was like, I'm doing all this triathlon training. I'm just going to skip all the smaller races and just go for the big one.
Mm.
So with Wisconsin, my family on my dad's side is originally from there. So I have a lot of cousins out there. They came out to watch too. So that was pretty cool. In the process of training for that Ironman, because once my training started, towards the end of 2020, I started running a little bit more, and I was like, I've never ran a marathon, I've never ran a half marathon, I've never done a 10K, a 5K. So my wife signed up for a 25K, and my first thought, because I read all those books, was, well, is that the furthest option? And she goes, well, there's a 50K. And I was like, yeah, sign me up for that one. And she was like, you just want to one up me. I'm like, no. But, honestly, yeah,
Yes.
I had wife. I'm a competitive person. And a lot of the stuff that we did working out, we competed against each other. Just little physical challenges, how many burpees each of us can do, how many pull-ups each of us can do, which she still can't do a pull-up, and I can do a shit ton. So yeah. So my competitive nature, I went for the 50K, and that was March 2021, and I was a year sober at that point.
Mm.
And my first 50K, I ran it just over 6 hours. And yeah, I traded, other addictions for another.
Mm. Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit as we transition into like this next phase of your story where you're getting into ultra running now. As you said, you're trading one addiction for another. And I hear this all the time. If you're inclined to addiction, then you're inclined to jumping head first into things. So if somebody goes to 12-step meetings, every day, or somebody picks up exercise and they start exercising every day, or whatever it is, whatever their thing is, there's the critic that says, oh, well, you're just transferring one addiction for another.
Yeah. I don't
And
really see it that way, though.
okay, so help me.
See it as,
You tell me your thoughts on it.
yeah, no, I said it as a joke. Like, running is not really an addiction for me. It's a challenge for me. That's how I see it. Because I still hate running. Like, if you love running, you're just fucking psycho. But I find it as a challenge that I can exert myself physically every day and get better at something, and also feel the benefits of it, right? But there are also days that aren't so good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine, because that's your body failing on you, and you have to learn to step back and take a break. You can't go 100% every day. You can try, but you're not going to give it your 100% every day.
And your
So
career's not going to last that long, probably.
yeah,
But
yeah, exactly. So, and that's where the cross training comes in. So just dialing it back, taking days off so you don't get sick. Your immune system goes down when you run 100-mile races. If you're like Andrew Glaze, where you can just fight through it every day. But other than that, I don't really see that addictive personality towards running as I
okay.
as I did with anything else. Like, I can
Yeah.
drop that theme any day and go do something else if I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah, I think me and you are on the same wavelength with that. I think probably the best book title I've ever seen is I Hate Running and So Can You. I think
Yeah.
it's the name of the book title because I guess people in my proximity assume that I love running because I do it. And which it just couldn't be more like I do it because I hate it. And I do it because it challenges me to do things that I hate that I know that are good for me.
Yeah.
And for me, and I want to ask you about this, for me, physically, if I can do that, then psychologically it transfers into other areas of my life where I'm doing things that I'd prefer not to do.
With running, like, you devote so much time to your training, you devote so much time to what you have to do on the day to day, but do you devote that much time to what you have to do at your job? Do you
Mm,
devote that much time to what you have to do at home? Like, do you find that balance? And that's where I'm at, is I found that balance. Like, I put as much effort as I can into work. I put as much effort as I can into my family, into my wife and my kids, to give back to them, to let them feel the presence of me and me feeling the presence of them and being present. And then with my running, it's separate. That's just my hobby, the thing that I like to do away from everything else, to run with my problems and work through them. Because that's my philosophy, is I might be having a bad day, but I could go out and run for 45 minutes and work through whatever was on my mind and come with it, either up with a decision or realize it's really not in my control and there's nothing I can do about it. So throw it out.
mm.
So running for me is just, I'm not running away from anything.
And how are you using that in conjunction with therapy these days? Like you said, you're working with the vet center out there. So how is that working, the combination of running and working on the psychology of things?
Yeah. So I'm just trying to better understand myself and why I fall into those thinking traps, and how I can better be present for my wife and kids, because I thought I was doing a well job at it and I wasn't. So I'm just trying to educate myself a little bit better and to better understand my upbringing and the whole psychology side of why I think the way I do and how I can fix that, and how to acknowledge that that's what's going on, and how I can stop myself from looking like a complete idiot
Mm.
in a situation. And I do this a lot too during running, like in races. Like, I listen to a lot of other people's stories, and some of them resonate with me a little more than others, right? But I feel like I don't give as much into each individual as I should. And that's just either I'm suffering in my own head to where like I kind of silence out some of it and I'm not reciprocating everything. I want to acknowledge what other people are saying better, to try and give back to them. Like, throughout racing, like, I help a lot of people with information, like if they're feeling bad, change what they're thinking about, or give them advice like, this didn't work for me, exactly what you're doing right now, I would suggest this, but if you don't want to, like, that's up to you to make that decision. Because during the whole process of it, your mind just like turns into jello. So like simple things like changing your socks, like a lot of runners will not change their socks because they don't think about it, but their feet are wet and blistering. So you see that they're slowing up and they're wincing on their face and like every step. And you're just like, well, have you changed your socks? Because like we went through that river crossing not too long ago, and we've come 5 to 6 miles down now, and it's heated up again. So now you're getting into blister territory. Or have you put anything on your feet? No. So like, now that I've realized that a lot more recently in races. And before, it was just like every man for themselves, every woman for themselves. I'm just gonna run by it. I'll share some things or whatever here and there, but I really want to like focus on someone else and help them, because I know they would probably do the same for me. Like, I'm still considered a new runner. Like, I just took this up racing 3 years ago and just started running for real like 3.5 years ago. So I'm no expert, but I know quite a bit now. And there are a lot of new runners in this community, and I'm trying to help whoever I can just so they don't make the same mistakes that I did early on. But I mean, that's how you learn, is through failure, obviously. But if I can help avoid that a little bit for them to where they don't have to push themselves all the way to failure, that's where I see me teaching is a better approach for me. Is, now that I'm realizing all these things, like through therapy, like, I don't know, I'm becoming a better, well-rounded person, I guess, to acknowledge other people's feelings and just, yeah.
That's something me and Ed Eddinghausen had a conversation on. The Jester had a conversation. I think it was my third episode.
Yeah, I actually heard that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so that was one of the themes that we were talking about, was this service that he has, where, his number one skill that he uses when he's really sucking and he's in his version of the pain cave is find somebody else who's sucking and then start to help them and start to put effort out to them. And yeah, so there's something to this idea of being of service to others that is very natural within us as human beings. That's what helps us thrive as human beings, right? Is to be of service to others. Now that can be abused, and it can go into areas of codependency and into areas where you're just completely focusing on other people's feelings to avoid your own feelings. So anything good can be abused, right? Like we know that as addicts. But if you're doing it in the right way and you're doing it to give a part of yourself to somebody else, there's something so reciprocal about that when it's done in the intent to be of service, not in the intent to, I'm going to escape through this individual, but through the intent of, I want to help this person out because I can tell they're struggling right now.
Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, early on in my running, my first official 100 that I did, I was too scared to ask for help, really. So like, I went into this race on my own research, on my own thoughts and opinions, and not asking anybody for help, what I needed. That was a lot of my issue early on, was I didn't know how to ask for help. It's actually a lot easier to ask for help and learn from it before you make the mistake. So if that's one piece of advice I can give anybody, it's don't be afraid to ask for help. And I've been telling that to quite a few people that I know that have been asking that question, like, how do I go about asking somebody to crew me or to pace me? You just ask, people will be willing to be there for you because they know you'll be there for them. Like recently, last year, I did Tahoe 200. And this was my second 200 in the same year. But going into it, I was like, I have no idea what I'm getting myself into other than I'm going to run over 200 miles. But I started asking around in the community who would be willing to come out and crew me, who would be willing to pace me. My wife was going to crew me out of the car and meet me at the different locations to where they could coordinate with her of where to pick them up, to drop them off where I'm at, to the pace. And the logistics are a big thing in these races. So a couple of
especially in the 200 plus ones, those are like
so I learned what I could, and then I reciprocated what I knew to my crew, and they made it happen, man. Like they took charge and got it all together, got together who was going to pace at what times, what day, and what sections. And then we had somebody dropped from being a pacer, and somebody showed up out of nowhere and paced me, like they decided last minute, like, yeah, you know what, I'll be there. They drove all the way out. I took a little nap, and you just got to ask for help. And so since I've been doing that, I have all that help. And when I went and did the Hurt 100 last year, I did the same thing. I asked a couple of guys that I knew. It's like, hey, I don't know anybody else that's crazy enough to come out to Hawaii to pace me, but would you be willing to do it? And they're like, heck yeah. So like, it's that power of opportunity, when you give somebody an opportunity that is going to help them maybe in the long run, like maybe they want to run that race too, and they want to see what it's like. how it feels, they're going to jump to it. So, like my friend Ben, he paced me at the Hurt 100 for 40 miles. And after doing that, he's like, yeah, I really want to do this race. I'm like, are you sure? Because you were with me at like my lowest point. And I was halfway through, like a little over halfway through the race. And I was like, I'm never coming back here again. But then by the end of the race, I was like, yeah, I want to come back every year. It's nice to have that person there or that crew there. They're there to help pick you up and say, hey, man, like, no, you're good. You got this. Like, you're doing good. Keep moving, you know, one foot in front of the other. It's like that little inner voice that you don't want to silence. You want to silence the voice that's telling you to give up. I've never, since starting these races, I've never had that voice telling me to give up other than at the Hurt 100 when I hit like over, like around mile 60 was when I was like, okay, this sucks. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I look at my watch and I'm like, oh no, I'm way ahead of the time. And they're like, yeah, we're making good time. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not quitting. Now, I will say recently I learned from failure. I did Javelin 100 again this last year. And I went out a lot faster than I've ever ran. I did my first 50 miles in like 8.5 hours. And I've never ran that fast. So by the time I got to the aid station at Jackass Junction, it was mile 52. I had to get some rocks out of my shoes. So I was trying to get my shoes off and then my legs went stiff. And so I was like, okay, I got some pretty bad cramps. And I tried to stand back up because I was like, nah, I'll deal with the shoes till I get back to the main camp. Well, then as soon as I tried to get something in my belly, my stomach turned because my legs were stiff. And so they put me in the med tent and they said they were going to let me leave for a little while because they wanted to give me something to settle my stomach. And they said I couldn't leave for like an hour. So then by that time it settled. They gave me food and all that. And they were like, all right, now we got to make sure you let it stay down. So we got to hold you for like another 45 minutes. I'm like I'm in a race right now, guy. Like we're at, coming on 11 hours now. Like I need to keep moving because I'm trying to get this sub 24. And my body rejected the food like as soon as I left after they held me for like another hour. So I was at that aid station for 2 hours. So after running again, I was like fast paced walking at like a 12-minute pace. As soon as I got back though, like I still didn't have quitting in my head, but as soon as I got back, my wife was like, you look like in the worst shape that I've ever seen you in a race. And I was like, I haven't been able to eat anything in like hours. And she's like, well, it's your call. It's up to you. There's still, 14 hours worth of the race and you got 2 loops to go for 40 miles. And I'm like, honestly, like, I think I've suffered a lot today and my legs were so stiff. There's no way I was going to run anymore. I could have walked it, but I honestly didn't want to risk if I couldn't eat for my body to just shut down on me while I'm out in the middle of the desert and then it turned into a worse scenario. So that's where that thought came into my head. Like, I don't want to worry anybody and have EMT have to come out and rescue me because there was already a few people that dropped in the middle of the race during the heat that they had to go out and get. So that's where I made that hard decision to fail. And going into running, I was like, I'll walk races if I have to and finish as long as I need to. But that race in particular, I had to give up. And it still haunts me. Like, I'm like, man, I could have walked it out. But at the same time, I'm like, I probably would have fell out. So I think I made the right decision to quit, which is hard for me because I don't ever want to quit. Like I love the challenge of every race that I have to do, but at some point we have to fail to learn where we messed up. And where I messed up was my nutrition early on. I wasn't eating enough. Like I was on top of my electrolytes. I was on top of my water intake. It was just the calories that I was putting in was not enough. So that's where it shut down for me.
And what did that look like for you in the immediate aftermath, the immediate, hours after, next 48 hours after, that sort of thing?
So I couldn't sleep like all night. I was, listening to people finishing all night long because we were camped at main camp. And so, I was happy for everybody that was finishing, that was getting their buckles and everything. And I still couldn't eat though. Like I wasn't able to eat anything until late morning the next morning. So I went like a whole nother 12 hours to 13 hours after I finished from when I actually ate again. And then having to pack up and go home that day, just being in the car for so long hurts my back too. And which recently I saw a chiropractor over December and got that fixed, which is why I was having the low back issues. And so and that was a bit of the pain that I had too from running that race. Was I had low back pain the whole entire race, which was messing me up because I'm like, am I like in the wrong position? Like, because I felt like I was upright the whole time, but the pain around my hips just kept getting worse too. So, I mean, a lot of that came to light to where I'm trying to see the good in why I failed that race, that I had other issues going on that I didn't even realize, And like going back to when you talked with Ed too, is, the recovery thing is a big deal with running. Like you have to really pay attention to what your body is telling you, because if you want to continue to go for a long time in the sport or in anything, you got to maintain it.
Yeah. And who better to listen to from the guy who holds like essentially every major longevity record in ultra running that there is,
Yeah. I mean, I learned a little bit from him too, like at one of the races that I did that was a timed event too. So like I got to talking with him and learned a little bit while I was running alongside of him. So I just love listening to that guy, dude. Like he's like a guru for endurance.
He really is. I feel like, well, every person that I've done an interview with for this podcast that has some type of background in ultra has an Ed Eddinghausen story, has a Jester story, right? Like they spent some miles with them at some point. I did a interview on the Golden Hour Adventure podcast, and Robbie on that, and he was like, "Oh yeah, my first 100, Ed was there," and so, and then he's sharing some of his stories with that. So yeah, that guy's amazing. You talk about legacy. Like his legacy is going to stretch far beyond his attributes and all the records that he's broken. His legacy into how he's fed into other runners, like inspired other runners to continue on their journey. Like that's huge, Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, he inspires me because like I'm still semi young. So like right now I'm working with a coach finally, because I want to gain a little bit of speed, and I got 2 100s this year, so I'm trying to win both of those. But in the long term, I'm like, if I go back to the slow pace that I had going, like it's not that slow, but it's slow enough to where I can consistently do it. I kind of want to one day do as many 100s as Ed. So that's kind of a goal for me, is like I want to do this for a very long time, up until I can't do it anymore. So if that's till I'm 80 years old, I mean, that's what I'm planning on doing.
Yeah. I don't know if I have any ambition to match him, but I do in terms of longevity. There's ambition there, right? Like there's a desire to keep pushing myself. And, as he's turning 62 and he's like, oh, I want to do 62 100s in a year. It's like, he just says it like, this is the thing that I'm going to do. He doesn't say it with any sort of hesitation or any sense of like, I'm just throwing a number out there to be cute. No, like he's serious about it,
His mind has been set on that since his record got broken.
Yeah.
So, like the next day, I want to say he thought of that idea. It was, well, I'm just going to one up it and go 10 up and set it at 62 instead of 52, since he beat me by 10 from 42. So, and that's how he is, he's the numbers guy, and like he calculates it out and he does his logistics and thinks like, these races are all going on in the same weekend. This one's starting on a Thursday. to where if I could, since he's done multiple day races, knowing how much distance he can cover, he knows within a 4 day span of, Thursday to Sunday, he can probably get 2 or 3 races in there, which he has done.
Mm.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you knew that. He's done 300 miles within a 4 day period,
Yeah.
going to 3 different locations. So, like, the guy can do it, like he's very serious about it. And yeah, I'm excited to see what he does, honestly, because ever since he put that number out there when I first heard it, I was like, oh yeah, he's gonna do it.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to highlight that you said real quick was you had essentially said asking for help gives opportunity to others.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is so lost within the concept of asking for help, is the opportunity that you afford other people to be of service to you or to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. And by withholding asking for help, you're taking away the opportunity for somebody to be able to extend themselves and feel better about themselves and have that reciprocating reward for being of help to somebody else,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a great point.
It clicked for me because I was always doing the acts of service for everybody else and never asking for that help for myself.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, everybody gives me these opportunities to do all this work for them, like moving their house, painting their house, pacing them in a race, or, just everyday stuff. But I've never asked for that help either. And I feel like to go for full circle back on that is, you got to have help every now and then too. So, that idea came to me during a 100-mile race. And I was like,
Yeah.
that just clicked right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, Erik. It's been an honor to have you on.
Well, I'll tell you what, sign up for Born to Run.
Okay.
Sign up for Born to Run. Come out to Los Olivos because it's right here in my backyard. And come run one of the races. You could do the 20, the 10, 30, the 4 day, or the 100-mile. And maybe sign up for a volunteer spot and just come out and be a part of the ranch.
Wait, when is the Born to Run happening?
It's in May. And I think there's limited spots available left. So, and you can bring the whole family. They can camp out right there on the course. We got live music. There's a wedding going on Saturday. My friend Pat Sweeney. I don't know if you know Pat. He works with Pickle Juice and Gooder sunglasses, but he's a barefoot runner, like literally runs barefoot. Him and my friend Sam, they're getting married. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I've heard Born to Run events are kind of wild and a little bit out there for like the ultra. Ultra events can be a little bit different and wild anyway, but I hear Born to Run is up there in terms of events and different things that's got going on.
It's its own thing, man. Like, it's not, you can't compare it to anything. Like, it's just a special experience. Like, you have a lot of different things going on, but it's just the whole community that Lewis puts out. It's just a rewarding experience to have. Like, I don't know if the Tarahumaras are coming again this year, but usually we have the Tarahumaras come out and they play, they're, what are they called? The bocce balls or whatever. They flip them with their feet and stuff, like their form of soccer. Like, they do all that, and they race too. And yeah, it's good mixing all the cultures. You see elites out there, you see brand new people. We have this new event that it's Born to Adapt, so it's all adaptive athletes out there as well, like missing legs and guys that are in wheelchairs and stuff like that. Like, it's a really fun experience.
Plug or anything you wanted to talk about before we end the episode that you got your tentacles into?
Well, other than racing, like, I have my goals this year with, I'm racing the Born to Run 100, and I'm going to win it.
Are you going to do it barefoot, or are you?
No,
okay.
I'm running. And then AC 100, I'm trying to go for a podium there. And then the last thing I want to say to leave everybody on is just the power of opportunity is something super, super important that through finding that help and giving others the opportunity to help, or just an opportunity in general with anything in life. Never count anybody out, especially if they fail. Just seek that out as an opportunity to teach or to learn from.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, for that. Yeah, really
Yeah.
appreciate having you on, man, again. And I think this episode's really going to be helpful to people, inspire people to do exactly what you're talking about, right? Go and take on failure, not run from it, but learn from it. And I really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, I appreciate having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being part of the Patina'd Podcast.
All right, buddy.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Patina'd Podcast. There are other shows that emphasize resilience, but my intent is to normalize personal development through embracing challenge by interviewing the common man and woman, the person that you and I can relate to. If you are someone who wants to soak up the insights of normal people doing extraordinary things, please subscribe. If you know somebody who is overwhelmed by fear and complacency, please share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Kenny Hill, and I run a private practice near Sacramento, California called Recovery Hill. My website is in the description tab along with my social media links. The intro music was Two in the Back, performed by Sunday at Slim's on Blue Dot Sessions.